We move on now to Edward Shanken. He's a visiting associate professor of digital and experimental media arts at the University of Washington. He's interested in the intertwinement, the convergence of art and science and technology. He's written a whole series of interesting books on the future and electronics and new media and art and a variety of other things, and I suspect that's what we get to hear about today. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here. It's really an honor. And to get set up, let's see. Thanks. Sure. So I actually met Allison in 2007, I think. I was invited to give a talk. I met Allison in 2007. I was invited to give a talk at DXARTS, and I guess you've just begun your PhD program there. Okay, well, you've been there a while. And now I'm there. But it's really great to see you and see how your work has evolved. I know that you got your PhD and went to Bangalore and been doing this work and showing at Ars Electronica, which I'll mention in my talk. It's one of the most prestigious venues for this sort of work. I'm not really going to be talking about systems art. I'm actually doing a book on systems art with Whitechapel, MIT. But what I really want to talk about is collaboration between artists and scientists and engineers. I've done a lot of work on systems art. There's a long history of it, sort of starting with this important article in 1968 by Jack Burnham on systems aesthetics, which has a long sort of history of being appropriated and reprogrammed for different sort of agendas in the history of art and practice. But I'm not going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about collaboration between artists, scientists, and engineers. Because I think that that kind of dovetails with one of the things that you brought up in your introduction. Well, how can art fit into this? Can artists collaborate? Well, clearly you've been collaborating with scientists in different ways, and I think there's tremendous potential for innovation and invention when artists collaborate with scientists and engineers and people in different fields. Now, I'm trained as an art historian, and art historians typically read their talks, and I'm going to be doing some reading, but I'll try to make eye contact and keep this very lively. And hopefully I'll be able to accomplish that. I will need my glasses to do that. Okay. So my talk is entitled The History and Future of the Lab, Collaborative Research at the Intersections of Art, Science, and Technology. I've seen the future and it doesn't work. This cynical quotation about the future may appear to be an inauspicious way to begin a discussion about the future of the lab and transdisciplinary research. However, it may also offer useful insight. The point is not that experimental labs dedicated to broad transdisciplinary collaboration at the intersections of art, science, and technology are doomed to failure. Rather, I suggest that conventional criteria are insufficient for determining whether or not they work. If a key goal of these labs, as I propose they are, is the creation of hybrid forms that transcend the disciplinary limits of any single field, that push conventional structures of knowledge and yield breakthrough innovations, then the evaluative methods particular to a given discipline may not offer an adequate measure of success or failure. New methods must be developed for ascertaining the value of the outcomes of a collaborative research program and for recognizing the importance of process as an outcome in and of itself. Harvard Business School professor Lee Fleming has noted that a creative team comprised of very similar disciplines will be unlikely to achieve a breakthrough. However, one comprised of very diverse disciplines is more likely to achieve breakthroughs, but will also produce many more low-value innovations. So, If experimental transdisciplinary labs of the future want to generate breakthroughs, they must take extraordinary risks and be willing to fail most of the time. It would be unrealistic, therefore, to hold them to ordinary expectations about success and success rates. Indeed, as multimedia computing innovator Alan Kay has said, oh, I'm sorry, I missed my cue there, has said, if you're not failing at least 90% of the time, you're not aiming high enough. But we should also expect that every now and then, these labs will work extraordinarily well, offering breakthroughs that would not have been made otherwise. I hope to revel as much in a lab's failures as in its tangible successes, and I encourage others to embrace these failures as a symbolic indicator of a lab's success in pursuing the extraordinary. Indeed, as the following example of Bell Labs and 9 Evenings suggests, some of the biggest flops in history provide some of future's brightest successes. A second case study of collaborations at Phillips Corporation offer further lessons that future labs could heed with respect to preserving their past for the future to build on. Prediction is difficult, very difficult, especially about the future. Bohr's aphorism offers an ironic perspective on how difficult it is in the present to recognize what the future will valorize from the past. This insight is particularly relevant with respect to cutting-edge research whose outcomes do not easily fit established norms, particularly those in experimental labs. Throughout history, the present has demonstrated a remarkable inability to recognize what its most important contributions to the future will be. So, with this observation in mind, we must take into account that the outcomes of experimental transdisciplinary research, although seemingly banal or esoteric today, may be the breakthroughs of tomorrow. In its heyday, Bell Labs was arguably the premier scientific research facility in the US. 7 Nobel Prizes were awarded. Inventions included the transistor, laser, information theory, the Unix and C++ operating systems. The list goes on. Bell Labs was also the site where pioneering work on computer music, computer graphics, and computer animation took place, largely under the auspices of John Pierce, Executive Director of the Research Communications Principles Division. Known as the father of the communications satellite, Pierce also supervised the team that invented the transistor, a term that he coined, developed pulse code modulation, which is the basis of digital audio, and wrote science fiction novels and popular articles, including one entitled Portrait of the Machine as a Young Artist. In 1955, Pierce brought engineer Mac Matthews to Bell, which sponsored Matthews' early forays into computer-generated music. It cost something like $100 an hour in the 50s to get time on a computer. Matthews' contributions to that field of computer music and digital sound are emblematized by the software program named after him, Mac's MSP, which is ubiquitous in new media art, and I'm sure you've used it extensively. In 1961, Pierce brought composer James Tenney to Bell as an artist in residence, where he worked closely with Matthews until '64, further developing digital sound synthesis. Other artists in residence include Stan Vanderbeek and Lillian Schwartz, both of whom collaborated with computer scientist Ken Knowlton, developing early computer animation systems in the 60s and 70s. This is a piece called Home Fields that Vanderbeek and Knowlton worked on together. This is an all-digital system called Beflix that Knowlton created. And the piece that Schwartz and Knowlton worked on together joins the more organic qualities of kind of a painted, manipulated, physical medium of film with computer-generated imagery. Two very different approaches to computer animation. having worked closely with artists including Jiantang Li, Jasper Johns, and Robert Rauschenberg. And if these names aren't familiar to you, they are big, big names in contemporary art in the 60s. Bell Labs engineer Billy Kluver gained Pierce's approval to allow his staff to collaborate with artists on the production of a now famous event, 9 Evenings Theater and Engineering, which took place in 1966. Now, in 1993, when I began my PhD research on the history of art, science, technology, very few people had ever heard of the 9 Evenings or Billy Kluver, EAT. That's no longer the case. This has become very widely known as contemporary artists like Allison and artists at DXARTS use the materials and techniques of engineering and science and develop their own tools and innovative methods. Art historians and other people have looked at this history as I've been doing and resuscitated some of these things, given them the place of honor in history that they deserve but was missing. Okay, so at that time, art and engineering were far more autonomous fields than they are today. There would have been no professional or cultural reasons for artists and engineers to encounter each other, much less collaborate together. One could seriously ask, as Kluver did then, have you ever met a normal, healthy, and working engineer who gives a damn about contemporary art? Why should the contemporary artist want to use technology and engineering as material? It was in this context that Kluver framed 9 Evenings as, quote, a deliberate attempt by artists to find out if it was possible to work with engineers. So importantly, this modest aim didn't propose grandiose outcomes in terms of technical and artistic achievements, but rather served to really just investigate whether or not it was even feasible for the two disciplines to collaborate together. Their ambitions, however, were much greater. 10 leading contemporary artists and 30 Bell Labs engineers worked together for 10 months on a series of now legendary performances, generating several patents in the process. It was seen by an audience of over 10,000. The project benefited from 8,500 hours of engineering expertise donated by the engineers, not the lab, which is what the agreement with Pierce was. And this is really top-level Bell Labs engineering expertise. There were also some midnight requisitions from Bell Labs, as Kluver told me, and significant personal donations from Kluver, Rauschenberg, and others. Rauschenberg was already making a lot of money selling art by 1966. As Kluver noted, everyone's investment in terms of putting yourself out on a limb was considerable. Indeed, given that the aim focused on exploring the possibility of working together, the risk of failure for such an elaborate and high-profile event was exceedingly high, with the reputations of many renowned artists and individuals and Bell Labs at stake. Despite the collaborators' superhuman efforts, critics' accounts of 9 Evenings are remarkable for their insistence on the failure of the event. By most, it was considered a flop. They complained of extended delays and poor sound quality, that technology didn't work, and that even when it did, it was underwhelming. The performances were panned for their lack of artistic merit. The artists complained that the engineers didn't understand their needs and couldn't solve the technical problems quickly enough. The engineers complained that they didn't get enough credit, that the artists didn't understand the complexity of the technical challenges the artworks posed, and that they didn't have enough time to solve them. Kluver complained that the critics had only attended the shaky opening nights and that they, like much of the audience, didn't understand what they'd seen, frequently confusing technological and artistic failures and features, not failures, features. Quote, anything that was assumed to have gone wrong, whether it actually did or not, was attributed to technical malfunctions, he wrote. And he claimed that, quote, the engineers did a fantastic job by any standard, and that, quote, half the performances were more or less completely successful, others suffered from a few failures, which were by no means as catastrophic as the critics implied. Okay, I just want to show another piece from this. We saw a couple pieces. But this piece in particular by Alex Hay, Grassfield, had a number of layers of complexity that I think are very interesting. In this piece, the artist wired himself up to PGs, so his bodily functions were being used as a source material to modulate sound. It also involved a projector, and he was involved, you can see different sensors strapped on his body, on his head. Throughout the performance, the armory speakers played sine waves and other electronic sounds. Actually, I should, he narrates this. So.
Yeah, it's very strange because it's not only recording, it was recording some sort of lung activity, the muscles around the lung, because I was getting a sort of a cardiac sound and a sort of a siren sound, which is very strange. But I found it very interesting, not at all what I expected.
What he's doing is really very mundane, just laying out his sheets. But it's not about the sheets so much, it's about the exertion, his bodily engagement, and the effects that that's having and how that's part of the system of the work, feeding back into itself. Very early multimedia projector, projecting video on a screen. And these are the sine waves that are being generated and modulated by his own body. That's Robert Rauschenberg. Okay. So, I'll just move on. The confused and conflicted reception of the 9 evenings had very little impact on the event's success in popularizing and capturing the public's imagination about the idea of artist-engineer collaborations. During the process of organizing the 9 evenings, the nonprofit organization Experiments in Art and Technology, EAT, was formed in order to make materials, technology, and engineering available to any contemporary artist. At its peak, EAT could boast of 28 chapters in the US and more internationally, and 6,000 members. So this idea really had some gravity at this moment in time. The idea of joining art and technology was really, really very, very powerful. EAT helped coordinate a number of important artist-engineer collaborations, including prize-winning commissions featured in the exhibition The Machine is Seen at the End of the Mechanical Age at the Museum of Modern Art in 1968, curated by Pontus Hultén, this beautiful steel-clad catalog. If you ever get your hands on one of them, it's quite a collector's item. They organized a competition that was advertised in Scientific American and the New York Times for artist-engineer collaborations, art-science collaborations, that were going to be in this exhibition. The winner was Jean Dupuis and Ralph Martel, Hearts Beats Dust, where they took a person's heartbeat, their pulse, and used that to modulate a drum that would disperse very light, powdery rubine material. So it would have this sort of dancing quality. It's sort of maybe an emulative thing, emulating the heartbeat in this physical material. In fact, there were so many entries of such high quality that EAT organized its own spin-off exhibition called Some More Beginnings at the Brooklyn Art Museum. And this included, you can't see it very well down here, a wonderful piece by Norman White, which is essentially, he didn't realize it at the time, but essentially a cellular automaton experiment. So when Professor Lee was talking about bottom-up organization, this has been percolating in artistic context for many, many, many years. EAT also did the design and engineering for the Pepsi Pavilion at the World's Fair, the Expo 70 in Osaka, Japan. They did it until they were fired for differences of opinion and budget issues. But this was seen by an audience of some million visitors. And in fact, Art and Technology in 1970 at the World's Fair, it was official US art. It wasn't just the Pepsi Pavilion, it was also the US Pavilion, which included works created through the Art and Technology program at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art between 1966 and 1970, including works by Rauschenberg, Warhol, in collaboration with Kluver and Klaus Oldenburg, really blue chip artists. So EAT's activities, 9 evenings in particular, have served as a vital inspiration for artists' ongoing investigation of emerging technology. I think this is especially true for artistic collaborations with engineers and scientists, and it has gained legendary status as a visionary initiative anticipating the future of art-science collaboration. Now, I don't know a lot of people who put Niels Bohr together with Yogi Berra, but I love this quote: "The future ain't what it used to be." Berry's witticism expresses remorse at the loss of optimism that was formerly associated with the future. It also suggests that what once looked shiny, new, and futuristic, like fins on automobiles, later became quaint objects of nostalgia. This inevitable destiny plagues the future of the future, to use John McHale's term. So in light of this humbling recognition, how can we preserve the essence of our own forward-thinking visions and practices, both the historical, cultural context in which they emerge, and the crucial lessons of, learned through experimental processes of grappling with the unknown, so that future generations can learn from and build upon them? And I struggle with this in my teaching. How can I bring alive something from 1966 that we only have a grainy black and white video of? How can we capture the excitement of an unprecedented human experience? No one had ever experienced anything like that before. And even things that I witnessed when I was doing my doctoral research in the mid-90s, they kind of look, I don't know, they're not as shiny and new. I mean, they look like fins on automobiles to kids today. So there's something about trying to keep alive the essence of what was so special about that at that moment, which I think is very challenging as a historian. But I think it's very important to do that in order to be able to build on that for the future. So, my second case study is Phillips Corporation, which is a leading European electronics firm with particular strengths in lighting and consumer electronics, especially audio. Important inventions include cassette tape, CD, DVD, and so forth. Phillips has also a long and distinguished history of innovative collaborations with artists. Compared with Bell Labs and 9 Evenings, the works generated there at Phillips achieved a remarkable degree of critical success and recognition in their own time. Yet much of that work has perished, including many of the archival records that would provide deeper insight into the processes and outcomes of these early collaborative projects. They also have this fabulous sort of spaceship architecture, which was where they showcased a lot of their technology, including these art and engineering collaborations. In 1956, Phillips engineers helped artist Nicolas Chauffeur create CISP-1, or CISP in French, which employs an electronic brain connected to sensors that enables the human-scale kinetic sculpture to respond to changes in sound, light intensity, color, and movement, including that of the audience. The whole sculpture moves on 4 rollers, while its 16 polychrome plates pivot and spin at different rates depending on external stimulus. It premiered in a performance with the Maurice Béjart Dance Company, interacting with dancers on the roof of Le Corbusier's Cité Radieuse in Marseille, accompanied by concrete music composed by Pierre Henry. This is like a fabulous smorgasbord of experimental avant-garde architecture, sound, and image, really amazing. This early responsive sculpture is perhaps the first work of art to explicitly incorporate the principles of cybernetics. And so now we do get back to cybernetics and systems theory. CISP is an acronym formed from the first two letters of the words cybernetic and spatiodynamic, one of Schoeffer's aesthetic principles. It is widely recognized as an innovative precursor to contemporary new media art, joining together kinetic art, artificial intelligence, robotics, performance, and interactivity. Not long after Schoeffer's successful collaboration, Le Corbusier was commissioned to design the Phillips Pavilion for the 1958 World's Fair in Brussels. Based on sketches of hyperbolic paraboloids executed by his assistant, architect and composer Yanis Xenakis, Corbusier supervised the creation of a stunning building that served as a showcase for Philips' technological innovations in light and sound. Xenakis' composition, Concrete PH, was heard upon entering and exiting the pavilion. Inside, we're looking at some of the imagery that was projected inside this remarkable architectural space here. Visual montage comprised of black and white film, 3 projectors, and a changing pattern of colored lights. Synchronized with the film, and that's the sound we're hearing now, Edgar Varèse's 3-channel music composition, Poème électronique, incorporated a wide range of sounds from machine noises and vocals to electronic tones. Developed at Philips Labs, using the latest electronic technology, Varèse's music was reproduced on a spatialized sound system consisting of some 400 speakers mounted throughout the architectural space, and you can see them dotted along the walls. So this landmark integration of architecture, film, music, light, and electronics constituted an innovative multimedia environment. Although the work in the pavilion were destroyed, they were memorialized in Mark Tribe's important monograph, Space Calculated in Seconds, Phillips Pavilion. He writes, called this a liturgy for 20th century humankind depending on electricity instead of daylight, and on virtual perspectives in place of terrestrial views. Now in 1958, this must have been really far out. But it's really difficult to even imagine what it would have been like to have inhabited this architectural space, really unusual architectural space, and the sort of sound and spatialized sound in that space. This very odd electronic sound that very few people had ever heard before, combined with this very bizarre kind of montage of slides and film. My final example is Edward Anadowitz's Censter, which was continuously displayed. Let's see. I think I missed that. There we go. Here's an earlier work that he did on the top right called Sound Activated Mobile. This was exhibited in the Cybernetic Serendipity Exhibition in 1968. But the Censter was created at Philips and exhibited there beginning in 1970 for 4 years. It was produced as a showpiece for Philips' futuristic engineering of its engineering skill. It was a 4-meter-tall robotic sculpture controlled by a computer connected to sensors, which enabled it to respond to the sound and movement of the audience. It was dismantled in '74. The electronic components were given away at the time, and with the exception of a few photographs, the Philips archives related to the Censter were destroyed. As of 2003, the mechanical structure was displayed as an outdoor sculpture next to the engineering company that obtained it, but it's just kind of this armature. Unanimated and decontextualized, the welded steel armature remains but a weathered ghost of a former glorious surrogate being that in its prime enchanted thousands, providing them with a glimpse into the future. And Ottowitz's work also has this really wonderful organic quality to it. The vertebrae-like joints, he really studied nature, biological systems in order to develop his conception for these robotic devices and artworks. Also to emulate behaviors that interacted with humans in ways that were compelling. The future is here, it's just not widely distributed yet. Novelist William Gibson's well-known aphorism suggests that the future of experimental labs and collaborative research is here now, according to St. William's Church of Cyberpunk. There's a little generator online where you can create this stuff. I didn't really see this. It seems that the issue is less a matter of existence than of spreading and disseminating it. Indeed, the precursors discussed above heralded major interdisciplinary labs and cultural centers such as the MIT Media Lab, the Ars Electronica Center and Future Lab, where Alison exhibited her work, and then Austria. The Swiss Artists and Labs program, centered in Zurich, but throughout the country. Baltan, which is at former Phillips, former Nat Lab, switched letters around at Baltan, and they're doing all sorts of research on the future of labs. And then STEM to STEAM initiatives that have emerged, which are trying to add the A for arts to science, technology, engineering, and math initiatives. So there's so much emphasis in public education in this country, in particular, science, technology, engineering, and math. Well, where's the arts in that? So many of us believe that science, technology, engineering, and math would really jump with huge advances if they incorporated arts into the mix. Because we think that artists have a tremendous amount to offer engineers and scientists, mathematicians, just like we believe they have an awful lot to offer us. So when our visiting artist from China said that there's as much or more knowledge in his tradition of what's happening inside our minds, inside our perceptions, inside our bodies, there was kind of people laughing. But I wasn't laughing, because I really believe that's true. And I think that people who spend a lot of time reflecting inwards, people who create artworks, have insights that offer important ideas, ways of creating knowledge, reconfiguring how meaning is produced, alternate paradigms for constructing realities. In fact, one of the key themes in the Macy conferences on cybernetics and in the more philosophical literature pertaining to systems theory is about reflexivity, about the inability of a scientist to get outside of his perceptions or her perceptions. We're always trapped within our systems, our perceptual apparatus, our own operating systems, conceptually and physiologically. So I think that there are different forms and techniques of understanding those better internally that science can learn a tremendous amount. I think art has a lot to offer that. Okay. So what can we learn from Bell Labs, EAT, and Phillips? How can these historical examples help us plot a path in the future? The success of extraordinary transdisciplinary projects often cannot be gauged at the moment of their creation. And its reception will likely be confused and contradictory. Those who lack expertise in the key fields contributing to it will have difficulty evaluating it in either artistic or scientific terms, much less in framing its potential historic significance. And as artist Florian Schneider has noted, Collaborations are the black holes of knowledge regimes. They willingly produce nothingness, opulence, and ill behavior. And it is their very vacuity that is their strength. It does not entail the transmission of something from those who have to those who do not, but rather the setting in motion of a chain of unforeseen accesses. I would argue that the transdisciplinary labs of the future, that wasn't supposed to fade, must boldly plunge into the vacuous black holes. Wow, wasn't that tricky? Enabling the unforeseen to emerge in all its opulence. The collaborations at Bell and Phillips demanded inspired and visionary leadership from technologists and corporations, as well as from artists and nonprofit foundations. Similarly, participants in these collaborations today must be willing to take risks, to cross boundaries, and to collaborate in unconventional ways that involve putting themselves out on a limb, as Kluver noted. They must be ready to deal with the challenges of translating across disciplines that employ very different descriptive languages, methodologies, and goals. Inevitably, misunderstandings will arise, tensions will build, egos will be bruised. Such conflicts should be embraced as a crucial and creative catalyst for innovation. Werner Heisenberg said that in the history of human thinking, the most fruitful developments frequently take place at those points where two different lines of thought meet. And I would argue, following Lee Fleming, that it happens when those lines of thought are as far away from each other as possible. But I would also say that it's frequently at those points of friction where the breakthroughs occur. Not just where two different lines of thought meet, but the points of friction where they rub or grate against each other. We shouldn't be afraid of that. Such creative frictions demand that transdisciplinary teams forge hybrid methods and forms of knowledge production. Such approaches may yield insights and results that could not have been achieved by using the methods and techniques of any single discipline. So, I'm very concerned about the sustainability of these sorts of practices. On a philosophical level, if the fruits of experimental research are not strictly art, science, or engineering, then what are they? What new knowledge do they produce or enable? What is their function in the world? On a practical level, the future sustainability of such research depends on answering these questions, because the labs themselves, like the careers of the artists and scientists whose work fuses disciplines, will be prematurely curtailed if their contributions are not recognized and rewarded. So as an integral part of their mission, transdisciplinary research labs must develop rigorous criteria for evaluating and documenting processes and products of transdisciplinary collaborations. They must develop compelling rationales for research as an engine for innovation. And innovation not just as a marketable commodity, but as constituting more subtle and perhaps more insidious and profound shifts in the conception of knowledge and society. Labs must play a pivotal role in cultivating broader public recognition of the cultural value of the arts to STEM research, and in helping make resources and expertise more widely distributed. Ultimately, Robert Rauschenberg, one of the founders of EAT, believed that the success of EAT could be measured by the degree to which it had become a redundant institution. In other words, that artist-engineer collaborations would have become so commonplace that EAT no longer was needed to facilitate them. And to a large extent, EAT has achieved the successes gauged by Rauschenberg's criteria. Artists and engineers do not need an intermediary organization to play this role of matchmaker anymore. Although I'm grateful when institutions do play that role. Similarly, the success of the new wave of experimental labs can be measured by the future redundancy that the current challenges, such as evaluative criteria, recognition of scientific and cultural value, and ubiquitous distribution, will be solved. Finally, I'd like to just propose a future of hybrid practice and hybrid practitioners. Whereas the number of hybrid practitioners increases, their impact on the centrality of technology and science in the production of art and design, and vice versa, will force a reconsideration of traditionally disciplinary models and methods of artistic and scientific research. Ideally, such work will create new forms and structures of meaning that expand the languages of art, design, engineering, and science, and that open up new vistas of creativity and invention. Thank you.
Questions, comments? Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. So in graduate school, I studied STEAM exhibits in museums. And I'm kind of glad that you showed some older examples of collaborative labs, especially since now there's so many that, CERN and MIT and even parts of major research institutes that have artists in residence. But I'm curious, in the 1960s, they also came out with C.P. Snow's, two languages. And
Two cultures.
Two cultures, my mistake. And I'm curious, what were the goals behind the start of some of these collaborative labs? Because now I think a lot of the goals behind collaborative labs really stem from a desire from scientific labs to be more approachable to audiences, and thus they ask for artists to come in.
Well, I think that historically and in present circumstances, this sort of public relations function of joining together art and science, art and engineering continues to have a lot of significance. It's one way to get funding. It's a way of doing good PR if you're a scientific lab, particularly if you're doing things that, or maybe people don't know what you're doing. They're spending hundreds of $millions on a super collider, and they don't see anything from it. But I think that for EAT, this was not the ambition. They were genuinely, my understanding is they were genuinely, and speaking to Lily Kluver, they really believed that science and technology were sort of out of control, that an over-rationalized approach to production and society. You read this in the work of Gregory Bateson, one of the great systems thinkers, key participant in the Macy conferences, in Jack Burnham's writings. They believed that it was really important to humanize technology. So this is also emerging at the moment of the Vietnam War. Rising environmental concerns. So science and technology, which had been sort of a panacea to cure all our ills, were starting to be something a little bit more threatening. It was also in the midst of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis in '63. So I think that it was important to artists, and maybe to engineers too, to try to figure out ways of humanizing technology, to create ways of, and I don't know why, but they thought, well, if artists work with technologists, with engineers, with scientists, we'll generate technology that's more human. It's not so super rationalized. It will somehow make the world a better place. I think some people still may believe that. I think that maybe I believe that, but in different terms. That just a little aside. In the mid-90s, Bill Joy, one of the founders of Sun Microsystems, had this revelation that he was a captain of technology industry, and that he had contributed to making a really threatening, scary world. And one of my professors, Christine Stiles, said, well, wake up, Bill. You know, if you'd taken an art history class, instead of all those computer science classes, you might have thought a little bit differently about how to do computer science and the world that that was creating. Why wake up as a middle-aged billionaire with this revelation? Why didn't you have that from the beginning? So I think that if we can incorporate the arts into STEM research, maybe it will make the world a better place. Not only by making better technology and science, but by making a world that's more responsive to other forms of knowledge production and systems of value.
Thank you.
I think we better move on to our last talk now. So again, thank you very much.